Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of silk footwear and golden toilet fixtures. Because you're about to join the elite 1% of yesteryear as a Victorian tycoon. Tonight you'll discover a reality where your riches are counted in fancy hats, your mansion requires its own zip code, and your biggest concerns include whether your manservant served the tea at precisely the right temperature. So before you get comfortable, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, but only if you genuinely appreciate what I create here. Drop a comment letting me know your location and what time you're tuning in. Now go on, turn down those lights, crawl under your hopefully fresh bed sheets, and switch on a fan for that gentle background hum. But hold on a moment. Did you actually require a personal attendant just to heat up your stockings before slipping them on? Was your wealth founded on coal mines and waterways, or simply the tried and true method of marrying within the family? Did your pet dog enjoy finer cuisine than half of London's population? And might your dinner gathering fall apart completely if the dessert gelatin failed to jiggle at the proper frequency? Well, congratulations. You've just awakened in 1875 and you're wealthy enough to buy yourself a seat in Parliament, or at minimum a ridiculously uncomfortable velvet throne. Best of luck. You shift around under 5 layers of embroidered covers in a sleeping space big enough for an entire cricket squad. Morning light seeps through heavy curtains while a chambermaid quietly tiptoes across endless Persian rugs to deliver a lukewarm glass of water and, bizarrely, a newspaper featuring your personal investment portfolio. Your day hasn't even begun, yet 3 individuals are already making excuses for how it might unfold. Your eyelids crack open, not to any alarm bell, but to the soft shuffling of house shoes and the far-off, sorrowful wheeze of a heating system the size of a locomotive. There's perhaps a subtle hint of lavender floating around, or possibly cedar balls and costly remorse. The linens under you are so stiff you're mildly concerned about getting cut, and the mattress contains more coils than the typical Victorian kid's plaything collection. This, it seems, represents opulence. The ceiling overhead is decorated with plump angels, every one of them gazing down at you disapprovingly for remaining in bed past 8:30. You'd prefer to ignore them, but you can't escape the notion that the cherub above your head is maintaining a scorecard. Down the corridor, someone chimes a bell with the grave importance of a church ceremony, alerting the entire household that his lordship has stirred, or is at least vertical. If you're puzzling over why your toes are frozen, it's because the bed measures roughly 12 feet in length and Victorian climate control doesn't exist. Instead, there's a coal flame flickering in the fireplace, maintained throughout the night by a shivering assistant butler who fantasizes about forming a workers' union. On the far side of the room, formal wear and 3 shirt alternatives have been arranged by your personal dresser, because evidently selecting your own garments is a risky endeavour better handled by experts. You might want to stretch, but proceed carefully. The bed's canopy features more elaborate trimming than a music festival, and disturbing even one decorative strand means 6 people will dedicate their morning to rehinging it. The windows are triple secured, partially for protection, but mainly because the world outside is packed with impoverished folks and natural air, 2 elements best kept outside. Your initial encounter involves a housemaid delivering your morning hydration, tepid and filled to exactly 7/8 capacity. You acknowledge her graciously. She bows as though you were royalty and instantly apologises for the water's warmth, the newspaper's delay and the hopeless despair of Victorian water systems. Someone else, perhaps the head servant, perhaps a spectre, lingers just beyond view, prepared to whisk away the tumbler the instant you pause. As you consider rising, you realise your morning robe has vanished. That's because it's been whisked away to be steamed, repressed and scented with something called imperial essence. In exchange, you discover a pair of ridiculous slippers lined with the fluffiest wool you've never encountered. Sliding them on becomes quite the adventure since they're roughly the dimensions and form of genuine sheep. The actual process of departing your bed proves more complex than contemporary income tax forms. Initially, you call for your dresser, who assists you into a robe featuring more needlework than the famous tapestry. Next, you're guided to a chair that serves no purpose beyond providing a place to sit. While another person styles your hair, your daily agenda gets recited. Morning meal at 9, letter writing at 10. And perhaps, if you're feeling particularly energetic, a gentle walk through the greenhouse, which you haven't actually visited since the Crimean conflict. Somewhere between stretching and footwear, you question whether this might be excessive. But then you remember that being a Victorian tycoon isn't about ease, but about proving to everyone within a 5-mile range that you are, indeed, extremely significant and possess the bedding to demonstrate it. Your morning routine is less a habit and more a show. Every gesture calculated to broadcast status, inspire jealousy and potentially bewilder the household pet. Even the tiniest elements, how you sip your water, how you receive news of a slight stock decline, how you slip on your house shoes with the gravity of a royal ceremony, are observed, evaluated and relayed to the head chef by midday. By the time you finally rise wrapped in wool and existential anxiety, you're prepared to tackle the day, or at minimum prepared to tackle breakfast, which, if history serves, will require more utensils than a state wedding, and with any luck, only a few more apologies. Well done. You've endured your first 60 minutes as a Victorian tycoon. Just 23 more to survive. Forget a quick morning rinse. Your washroom is a paradise of ceramic, stone and water systems that grumble menacingly whenever you attempt to bathe. The water's either boiling or freezing, and there's a real possibility a manservant is standing by to present you with a towel with the kind of respect most folks save for historical documents. You might dream of a relaxing soak, but Victorian washrooms are less about unwinding and more about endurance. Stepping into your private lavatory feels like entering something between ancient Roman baths and a science experiment gone awry. The tiles are so frigid your feet consider going on strike, and the bathing vessel itself could easily accommodate a small boat race. Somewhere in the distance, the waterlines begin to tremble in objection and threatening preview of what's approaching. It's crucial to understand that as a Victorian tycoon, you're supposed to cleanse yourself regularly, but never so frequently as to appear continental. Bathing becomes a careful balance. Too infrequent and you're labelled as common folk adjacent. Too often and the community gossips. There's also the minor issue of the waterworks, which were engineered by someone who studied heated water in a periodical, but never actually experienced it. The intricate maze of pipes hisses, clanks, and occasionally explodes in a display of Victorian theatrics, leaving you with either an ice bucket challenge or lobster preparation. No aspect of this routine is private. While you might dream of solitude, your washing becomes a group activity, starring the bath helper, the water boy, the dresser, and sometimes a pipe fitter who dwells in the walls, and only appears when catastrophe hits. Decency is preserved through a careful system of folding partitions, quick glimpses, and the mutual understanding that nobody discusses the incident when the hot valve launched itself across the chamber. Your ceramic seat, literally a throne with cushioned seating and more engravings than most cathedrals, sits in a cramped, echo-filled chamber off the main bath. The water closet, as it's called, represents both an engineering wonder and a leap of faith. Indoor water systems are a contemporary miracle, but they're also a gamble. Every flush becomes a roulette spin. Will it produce a gentle burble, or will the mechanism revolt, creating a minor flood and an emergency staff assembly? Bath water gets drawn with great fanfare. Pails are transported from the kitchen by red-faced workers, who then check the weather guide to predict whether today's water will be clear, muddy, or enigmatic. If you're fortunate enough to have flowing water, you can experience the excitement of hot and cold handles that function separately, forcing you to perfect the delicate skill of alternating scalding and freezing. Getting the temperature correct becomes less spa experience and more laboratory. Mid-process soap arrives as scented blocks, so solid you could use them to protect your reputation in a sword fight. Towels are plush, if somewhat moist from the eternal British weather, and embroidered with your initials just in case you lose track of your identity. Halfway through the trial, a manservant stands nearby, gaze averted, prepared to provide a towel with all the seriousness of a coronation blade. Dental care gets performed with a rigid bristle and a harsh powder containing limestone, carbon, and the persistent regret of anyone who's experienced tooth decay. There is naturally a special tumbler for rinsing, displayed on a silver platter beside a bottle of lavender water, some rose-scented vinegar, and a puzzling container marked hair pomade that nobody has risked opening since the Crimean conflict. Regardless of how smoothly you organise, something will malfunction. Perhaps the heating unit stutters and floods the room with vapour clouds so thick you lose your path back to the towel stand. Maybe the pipes rattle until the dog takes cover under the lounge chair. Or, in a moment of genuine Victorian mayhem, a worker slips, a bucket tumbles, and suddenly the marble floor is flooded with sudsy water, your pride floating with the foam. By the conclusion, you're somewhat cleaner, thoroughly humbled, and freshly thankful for indoor plumbing, even if it does threaten to detonate. Every other Tuesday you emerge from the washroom rosy-cheeked, towel-wrapped, and prepared to confront the next obstacle, getting dressed by committee. In Victorian England, cleanliness approaches holiness, but achieving it feels suspiciously like comedy. Getting dressed isn't simply an activity, it's a group effort. A dresser, a maid, and possibly an entire regiment stand ready as you squeeze yourself into starched collars, countless buttons, and a foundation garment. If you're feeling elegant or unfortunate, by the finish you're perspiring like a coal worker, except you possess the mine. The day starts with a sharp rap on your dressing chamber door. The dresser enters, arms loaded with clothing, pants so rigid they could remain upright independently, shirts with collars keen enough to cause injury, and at least 3 vests, because nothing declares prosperity like the capacity to misplace a vest and not realise for days. The maid arrives with fresh gloves, 4 shoe assists, and an expression that suggests she's still processing last week's cufflink disaster. Your initial challenge is the undergarment, an elaborate set of linen shorts and a long-sleeved undershirt that would, in any reasonable era, be considered sleepwear. This represents the only comfortable aspect of the procedure, so savour it. Next arrives the foundation garment, and yes, if you're a gentleman of certain status or a lady of any status whatsoever, you might be convinced, pressured, or directly forced into one. The objective is to achieve the shape of a stylish hourglass or a well-padded armoire, depending on personal goals and abdominal strength. Once you've survived the corset, now breathless, slightly compressed, and reconsidering your choices, it's time for the shirt. The shirt must be starched to the texture of plasterboard and secured with fasteners so complicated they have their own listing in the family accounts. The collar comes next, and it's less a clothing item and more a tool for measuring your pain threshold. It perches high on your neck, inflexible, prepared to gently strangle you whenever you rotate your head. At this stage, your dresser seems to have partnered with the maid, and the pair begin a coordinated dance of fastening, adjusting, and forcibly tucking. If you're a lady, things become even more complex. Under slipstays, corset cover, underskirts, yes, multiple, bustle, and at least one layer whose entire function is to ensure your gown extends at a 90-degree angle from your waist. Skirts get lowered over your head like you're being costumed for a stage show by a team that can only communicate through dramatic gestures and the occasional pin. Bodices get laced, belts tied, ribbons adjusted, and suddenly you discover you haven't actually donned the dress yet. Accessories follow, and each proves more ridiculously precise than the previous. Gloves for grieving, gloves for horseback riding, gloves for acknowledging people you'd prefer to ignore, Footwear with buttons so minute they need a special tool. Never mind that you'll need to remove them in 6 hours for an outfit change. Pins, hat spikes, watch chains, and for gentlemen, a pocket timepiece on a chain that exists purely to inform people you're too significant to arrive punctually. Head coverings are required. For men, it's a top hat so towering it threatens low hanging. Light fixtures for women, a creation of plumes, ribbons and tiny birds, sometimes genuine, sometimes not. Balanced precariously atop a nest of pins. One careless sneeze and you're featured in the morning publication. And the layers, always additional layers. Vest, dress coat, outer coat, overcoat, cloak. If it's winter, add a hand warmer, neck wrap, and an existential crisis about whether you'll ever bend at the middle again. If it's summer, congratulations. You're now marinating in your own prosperity. By the time you're clothed, you've perspired through 3 layers. Your corset is debating with your lungs, and you're already behind for breakfast, which will naturally require a napkin embroidered naturally to dab your forehead, a final inspection in the mirror by your dresser, a lint brush to the shoulder by the maid, and a discreet adjustment of your necktie. You step into the corridor, prepared to start your day, or at least prepared to sit down and recover from the ordeal of getting clothed. Your appearance suggests success, but your internal dialogue suggests, please help. Congratulations. You're now fully dressed, completely drained, and have already accomplished more before breakfast than most people manage in a week. And you're definitely never, ever recovering those 20 minutes of your existence. You meet your family in a dining hall roughly the size of a contemporary airport terminal. Breakfast becomes a procession of smoked fish, organs, preserves, and enough tea to refloat the British fleet. There's a rigid seating hierarchy. Eye contact becomes a political declaration, and the toast remains predictably cold. You enter the chamber with all the seriousness of a diplomatic meeting. Sunlight streams in through windows taller than most Victorian youngsters, lighting up a table that extends toward the distance. Each chair gets positioned with the accuracy of a military operation, and heaven protect the unlucky individual who sits incorrectly. At the table's head sits the family leader, reading the newspaper with an focus typically reserved for crisis negotiations. The family matron oversees the tea ceremony like a high priestess performing a sacred ritual. Children get arranged in declining order of value and/or volume. A manservant, whose primary role seems to be projecting disapproval, hovers behind your chair, ready to rescue you from wandering crumbs or an accidental preserve mishap. Silverware sparkles, plates get stacked precisely, and the napkin, starched to a degree unknown to contemporary science, rests across your lap like a surrender flag. You aren't so much consuming breakfast as you are presenting it with all the nervous choreography of an amateur dance performance. The menu proves both extravagant and intimidating. There are eggs, gently boiled, firmly boiled, possibly existentially boiled. Next, a generous platter of bacon strips so thick you could repair your footwear with them. The organs glisten threateningly, challenging you to recall what they actually represent. If you want to stay safe, there's always the bread selection, fresh rolls, pastries, and, naturally, toast slices so cold and stiff they could serve as construction material. The only item guaranteed to be steaming hot is the tea, and even that demands a complete board meeting to determine whose cup gets filled first. Breakfast discussion is at best awkward. There are unspoken regulations. Children speak only when questioned. Adults speak only about subjects the patriarch endorses, and under no conditions should anyone mention bodily functions, Americans, or last night's vision involving the minister and an escaped pig. Most remarks get limited to "pass the jam, please," or "how beautiful the flowers appear in the greenhouse this morning," which translates to "I know you're concealing the premium preserves, Aunt Edith." If you dare lock eyes with your sibling, you risk triggering a diplomatic crisis over who consumed the strawberry spread. The family hound sits beneath the table, hoping to catch a dropped sausage or, if that fails, a moment of warmth from anyone bold enough to violate protocol. The youngest child, positioned on a stack of cushions, pokes suspiciously at a smoked fish, fantasizing about the day when breakfast will include something created after 1890. Your grandmother, wrapped in black lace and decades of built-up bitterness, sips her tea with the manner of someone who endured the siege of Sebastopol and found it less demanding than this morning's seating arrangement. Midway through, the head servant glides in to declare the latest news, a minor investment variation, a royal betrothal, or, if it's a particularly thrilling morning, the surprise visit of a distant relative who's arrived to take the waters and definitely not request money. This gets acknowledged with courteous nods, a flutter of teaspoons, and the silent math of who can claim a sudden pressing appointment elsewhere. Every aspect of the meal gets orchestrated. Forks and knives get handled with military accuracy. Butter gets spread so thinly on toast that you start to suspect it's a symbol for your family's emotional existence. If a crumb escapes, the hovering manservant appears with a brush and an expression that suggests he knows where you store your embarrassing childhood drawings. When you finally conclude, you mustn't simply depart. There's a protocol: napkin folded, chair pushed in, a murmured "thank you, mother." Any deviation, and you risk being analysed at length in the parlour before lunch. You rise, stomach satisfied but spirit slightly depleted, and prepare for the next conflict. Morning letter writing, but take comfort. In Victorian England, breakfast wasn't simply the most significant meal of the day. It was the opening battle in a daily conflict of manners, family politics, and bread that could outlast the apocalypse. You don't perform chores, you handle management. Your home operates on a workforce of dozens, each with a role so particular it may never get executed. The head servant runs the household, the chef runs the kitchen, and the dishwashing maid mostly runs from the chef. Your primary responsibility is pretending you remember their names. Life as a Victorian tycoon is, above everything else, a continuous game of who relocated my cheese, and which one of you serves as cheese manservant. Your days get spent floating from one polished chamber to another, while the house buzzes with the quiet panic of people desperately attempting to avoid detection. At any moment, your mansion houses an entire ecosystem of human effort, one in which you represent the top predator and everyone else has evolved advanced camouflage. The head servant serves as the commander, overseeing the household workforce with the unwavering seriousness of a Greek deity and the moustache of a particularly grave walrus. He speaks in deliberate tones, moves only at respectable speeds, and knows every single event that occurs within a mile of the silver storage, his primary duty, ensuring you never realise that things occasionally malfunction. If you ever observe the head servant running immediately, evacuate the building. Below him in the hierarchy stands the housekeeper, whose keys rattle with the subtle threat of a medieval prison guard, and whose glare can reduce a grown manservant to a sobbing apology. She represents the genuine master of the house, managing the female workforce with military precision and the type of scheduling discipline that would intimidate Google. The chef controls the kitchen, a separate realm filled with steam clouds, panic screams, and a constant undertone of passive-aggressive baking. The mere hint that you might prefer breakfast at 9:30 instead of 9 precisely can trigger a minor uprising. The dishwashing maid, the lowest being in the household hierarchy, exists in perpetual fear of the chef and spends her days frantically cleaning mountains of dishes and her nights writing sorrowful poetry about sauce. There are manservants who exist primarily to transport items from one chamber to another and appear ornamental in uniform. They move in coordinated pairs like highly trained penguins and open doors. With such drama you'd think there was a contest for most theatrical entrants. There's also a dresser whose role is to prevent you from clothing yourself and who receives each of your style decisions with an expression of subtle, deeply British disappointment. Laundry workers, chambermaids, gardeners, lamplighters, stable hands and drivers all comprise part of this elaborate backstage team. The lamplighter's role is to drift through the house at sunset, igniting dozens of gas lamps. With a long rod and the posture of a disappointed fencing master, the gardener maintains the ground so carefully that a stray weed gets treated like an act of revolt. The nursery gets ruled with an iron rattle by the nanny, a woman of unclear age and endless patience who can silence a screaming child with a single look and a spoonful of medicine. Mysterious, possibly alcohol. In her domain, parents are merely background noise, occasionally called for public appearances or the yearly family photograph. The strangest roles are the ones created purely to absorb extra relatives or compete with the neighbours. Do you actually need a dessert made? Probably not, but you can't risk being the only family on the block without one. What about the errand boy? His main responsibility is to stand in the hallway looking mildly puzzled. He's excellent at it. Managing all this becomes less about command and more about negotiations. The secret is to seem thankful without ever discovering anyone's real name. You depend on you there and my good fellow more than you'd care to acknowledge. Once you called the gardener chef by mistake and got banned from the rose garden for a month. You still haven't bounced back. Most of the time the servant army remains invisible, sliding in and out of rooms like particularly critical ghosts. But occasionally you catch a whisper or a look as you pass a reminder that while you may be the master, they're the ones who know where the quality liquor is stashed and exactly what you did at last year's holiday celebration. If all else fails, remember this tip generously. Apologise frequently and never, under any conditions, ask the dishwashing maid for her tragic source poem. Some things are better left unmentioned. Even in the most magnificent of houses, every outfit represents a silent resume, a test of how many fabrics you can pile on before fainting from overheating. Clothes communicate not just preference but financial status, meaning half your wardrobe gets dedicated to being deliberately uncomfortable, just to prove that you can. To be a Victorian tycoon is to exist in a reality where your social position gets measured in buttons, ribbons, and yards of imported lace. Your appearance becomes less about personal expression and more about providing a public announcement. Yes, I possess money, and yes, I plan to endure for it. There's no such concept as dressing casually. Even the idea of Casual Friday would get you blacklisted from society and possibly banished to France. Each morning starts with the same existential puzzle: silk or satin, velvet or brocade, or perhaps all of them simultaneously. For gentlemen, the rule is straightforward. If your suit can remain upright without you in it, you're halfway there. Lapels are broad enough to function as gliders, and your vest is embroidered so elaborately it could serve as a family banner. The pockets are entirely ornamental because heaven forbid you actually transport anything. Your tailor has dedicated the past week stitching your initials into the lining, just in case you forget which jacket belongs to you, or, more likely, which one you wore to yesterday's luncheon. For women, fashion becomes a high-stakes game of fabric engineering. A successful ensemble may require 3 underskirts, a whalebone corset, and a hoop skirt large enough to shelter small animals. Gowns get selected not for comfort but for their capacity to express. I can afford silk from China and ostrich plumes from locations I can't even pronounce. Walking through a doorway becomes a strategic maneuver, requiring careful positioning and occasionally the temporary removal of walls. Accessories are where things get truly absurd. No outfit is complete without at least one aggressively large hat, preferably covered in deceased birds and enough netting to trap passing bugs. Jewellery isn't so much worn as positioned brooches the size of plates, bracelets jingling like a miniature blacksmith shop, and necklaces so heavy you develop a permanent hunch pocket. Timepieces, collar pins and cameos all serve the same function to loudly declare your wealth without ever uttering a word. Footwear is a unique torture. For men, they're polished to a shine that could blind a moth at 50 paces. For the ladies, they're intricate creations of silk and whalebone, completely impractical for anything resembling actual movement. The discomfort is intentional. If you can dash to catch the streetcar, your outfit is all wrong. The changing seasons only amplify the spectacle. Summer demands ivory gloves, cotton suits, and the refined skill of pretending you're not perspiring. Winter brings fur coats, hand warmers, wraps, and the urgent, nagging worry about whether your fingers will go numb before the coach shows up. Parasols transform into style declarations, their grips carved from bone or nacre, the silk dyed to complement your disposition, or more accurately, your climbing aspirations. Style publications arrive at your residence weekly, each edition packed with blueprints, sharp critiques and sketches of Parisians sporting garments that might be questionable in Britain. To stay current means risking financial ruin. To lag behind spells social doom. Your lady's maid or manservant must not only recall the proper sequence of your ornaments, but also provide tactful hints like, "My lord, you donned that necktie to Lady Worthington's Friday reception," and the elderly Duchess expressed disapproval. The cardinal principle: ease is sinful and practicality is betrayal. Why carry pockets when you can sport a purse the size of a postcard? Why wear basic sleeves when you can have sleeves so puffy they need their own cap? Each dawn, you encase yourself in cloth and jewels, your attire a war cry in the endless battle for social advancement. Venture outside, choking in magnificence, and brace to be observed, critiqued, and, with luck, coveted or, at minimum, sympathised with by anyone familiar with collapsing into an ornamental water feature during an outdoor gathering. Congratulations! You appear worth a fortune, mostly because you're sporting half of one. Without television, internet, or even dependable power, the Victorian wealthy find amusement through drawing room diversions, musical gatherings, and obligatory discussions. If you're truly desperate, you might attempt reciting your own manuscript out loud. Terrible choice. Picture a Thursday evening in 1878. No browsing, binge-watching, or endless scrolling, just the ticking of a tall case clock and the sound of the manservant adding another log to the hearth. Company arrives costumed as though expecting to be immortalised in oils, and you gather in the sitting room, a stretch of figured carpeting and mildly judgmental ancestral paintings, prepared to occupy several hours without even a word puzzle to rescue you from the primary agenda. Drawing room entertainments are not for the weak-hearted. Favoured choices include acting games, which focus less on skillful pantomime and more on Accordelier's failure to differentiate between Hamlet and a limping goat. There's also the Parson's Feline, a challenge requiring rapid-fire descriptions, doubtful pronunciation, and the self-control to maintain composure when someone inevitably declares the Parson's cat a disgraceful cat, prompting polite chuckles, knowing perfectly well the real Parson's cat never bounced back from last season's embarrassment. Should your company feel exceptionally scholarly, you might attempt Ramifications, a group storytelling exercise that always deteriorates into an absurdist creation featuring Lord Thistlebottom and an enigmatic rutabaga. Stationery, writing implements, and an almost disturbing hunger for social mayhem are essential. Extra credit if you can slip in a gentle dig about the host's choice in window treatments. Yet the real foundation of the gathering is entertainment. Someone always gets volunteered for piano duty, a responsibility that befalls whichever relative is most susceptible to guilt or least capable of feigning a twisted ankle. The selection is merciless: ballads, dance pieces, and if you're particularly unfortunate, an energetic compilation of sailor songs performed on the accordion. The only thing more perilous than declining to clap is asking for a repeat performance. For the less musically gifted, there's always the alternative of theatrical recitations. Perhaps you retrieve a hefty tome of Browning, or even worse, attempt sharing your own novel with an audience possessing the collective focus of a distracted spaniel. As you ramble about doomed heroines and storm-swept highlands, your guests make their best effort to seem touched, though several suppress yawns behind decorated handkerchiefs, and you discover too late that even your own footman is gazing longingly toward the exit. Discussion becomes a contest unto itself, regulated by rigid Victorian conventions. Acceptable subjects encompass the climate, the monarch's newest headpiece, and whether the locomotive to Bath is maintaining schedule. Hazardous ground includes governance, private emotions, or any reference to indoor facilities. Gaps in dialogue get filled through tactical throat clearing, shuffling of visiting cards, or a swift round of naming the most obscure royal relations without weeping. If fortune smiles, the evening might showcase a visit from the household conjurer or a presentation of the latest viewer device, a thrilling contraption displaying somewhat fuzzy pictures of another person's seaside vacation. In Brighton, this qualifies as revolutionary entertainment in an era when even the flicker of a gas flame counts as excitement. Sometimes card games of bridge or piquet emerge among the seniors who compete with the gravity of prize fighters and the cunning of professional gamblers. The youngsters get exiled to the nursery where they can entertain themselves with glass spheres, spinning toys, and the perpetual fantasy of escaping to an age with animated pictures. As the night progresses, so does your impatience. You start longing for the blessed relief of retirement or a small crisis that demands departing the sitting room. But obligation beckons. You must persist, sipping lukewarm beverage and applauding yet another rendition of simple melodies until finally the tall case clock chimes an hour even the Victorians deem unreasonable. You wish your company farewell, consoled by knowing tomorrow delivers another evening of matching amusement. Rest arrives quickly, if only to shield you from the horrifying possibility of having to act out the cavalry charge before your relatives by marriage once more. Midday and evening meals are both gastronomic endurance tests, showcasing a dozen courses, half intended to baffle your taste buds and the remainder designed to burden your circulation. The wine selection exceeds your genealogy, and if you remain famished after sweets, that's what the chilled pastry on your bedside table serves. The feast starts long before you glimpse a morsel. An army of chefs, kitchen maids, and nervous scullery workers have already invested hours wrestling with jellied dishes, balancing puddings, and menacing a roasted fowl with sauce. The dining bell chimes with the solemnity of a royal decree, summoning you and your elegantly dressed family to the polished oak table, every surface groaning beneath candle stands, glassware, and a procession of ornamental fruit arrangements that prove, honestly, more daunting than appetizing. You settle down and prepare yourself. Victorian dining represents an athletic challenge, and the guidelines are: maintain your rhythm, never seem enthusiastic, and for goodness sake, never confess you're uncertain which utensil to employ. The opening course materializes, typically an obscure broth so transparent and weightless you question whether there's anything in your vessel whatsoever. This gets followed by seafood, then a cut of mutton, then some variety of wildfowl stuffed within another wildfowl, and conceivably a pastry containing both for completeness. Between servings, your dish gets swept away by a brigade of attendants whose exclusive function seems to be guaranteeing you never spot the base of your porcelain. Each preparation arrives with a title so complex it resembles a minor European duchy: fillet of turbot in royal style with shellfish stuffing, or braised partridge with vegetable mosaic. You nod with approval, acting as though you comprehend what you're consuming. Garden produce is available, but it's primarily ornamental. Peas glazed with sufficient butter to oil a locomotive. Turnips carved into blossoms, and tubers mashed so thoroughly they mirror Victorian wall decoration. If you're particularly unlucky, you'll encounter moulded gelatin, a quivering creation cherished by the period's cooks, but dreaded by everyone else. Nothing matches the experience of cold, unsteady veal stock sliding menacingly across your dish while your tablemate politely acts oblivious. Wine remains compulsory, and in volumes that would horrify a contemporary wine expert. Each serving gets matched with a fresh bottle, described in worshipful tones by a server who's learned the presentation but never sampled the product. You swirl, inhale, and taste, while quietly hoping the seafood course vintage will erase the memory of the gelatin. By dessert time, you're uncertain whether you're intoxicated, victorious, or approaching the brink of joint inflammation. The sweets themselves showcase Victorian creativity and questionable judgment. Towers of crystallized sugar, cakes so heavy they endanger the table's stability, and layered desserts so saturated with brandy that children get politely discouraged from participating. There are fruits, always peeled, cored and arranged with medical precision, and cheeses so pungent they qualify as armaments. The final course represents both a particular dish and a general menace. It might be fat-based, sponge-like or mysterious. It's never voluntary. The meal concludes not with contentment, but with surrender. The gentlemen withdraw to the smoking room for fortified wine and tobacco. The ladies drift away for coffee and the ceremony of comparing headwear. You, meanwhile, find yourself contemplating the reality that despite the enormous quantity of food, you're already scheming a midnight assault on the previously mentioned chilled pastry, perhaps accompanied by leftover cheese, assuming it hasn't departed under its own steam. Existing as a Victorian millionaire means feasting like nobility but digesting like a commoner, overstuffed, somewhat bewildered and quietly dreading the next serving. And somewhere in the shadowy passages of the kitchen, the cook already plots tomorrow's offerings, and the cycle of culinary excess starts fresh. Your offspring function more as decorative accessories than actual relatives. Displayed in elaborate clothing and only produced for visitors, celebrations, or periodic reprimands, they're predominantly reared by caretakers and occasionally spotted peeking at you from behind a vase. To the broader world, your Victorian children serve as miniature advertisements for your family's social position, exhibited in coordinated sailor outfits and white aprons, as pristine and untouched as fresh currency. Each child's hair gets parted with railroad precision, their footwear polished to reflective perfection by someone probably too young for voting rights. At social functions, they arrange themselves like the world's most anxious game pieces, genuflecting and bowing with the rigid courtesy of people who've been promised extra holiday pudding. But behind the curtain, the actual work of nurturing your heirs belongs to a mysterious network of nursemaids, instructors, tutors, and, if you're truly stylish, a foreign-speaking mademoiselle who claims to teach French but mainly practices her English. These professionals rule the nursery like benevolent dictators, conducting a system of lessons, strolls, and, weather permitting, military-grade fresh air activities. You, meanwhile, remain free to pursue significant grown-up matters like organising place settings for next Tuesday's tea or fretting that your child's piano lessons lag 2 years behind schedule. When the children get permitted downstairs, it becomes an occasion requiring strategic planning. First comes the alert. Children will appear at afternoon tea. Servants rush to secure fragile treasures. The family pet gets banished outdoors, and a dish of hard candy gets strategically placed to ensure good conduct. Your personal part stays mostly symbolic. Nod with approval, pose a question about their education, and try not to appear disturbed when one declares they've been gathering amphibians in the water feature. Discipline involves a complex ceremony handed down through stern governesses, Victorian moral stories, and a rotating collection of intimidating aunts. If a child misbehaves by, say, voicing an opinion or laughing at inappropriate volume, there follows a brief dignified speech about the family reputation, followed by dessert removal, or in severe cases, a threat of dispatch to boarding school in Wales, which even adults acknowledge surpasses most punishments. Education remains crucial, but the syllabus differs. Boys get prepared for Cambridge, government service, and the vague hope of avoiding financial ruin. Girls receive drilling in French, music, needlework, and the essential skill of not collapsing during dinner dances. Both must learn horsemanship, recite classical languages, and never ever challenge a grandparent who might reward proper behaviour with a cryptic family treasure like a ceremonial ladle or a preserved barn owl. Even recreation becomes performance. Playthings include elaborate metal soldiers, ceramic dolls, hobby horses, and puzzles so intricate you half suspect they're preparing your heirs for future intelligence work. Outdoor activities get strictly monitored, with fresh air deemed both a moral and medical necessity. You might glimpse your children through the morning fog, marching across the grounds under the watchful eye of their nurse, bundled in so many layers they resemble well-dressed garden figures. Emotional connection gets encouraged from afar, embraces stay rare, affectionate displays get rationed, and bedtime tales get read by candlelight from volumes containing more moral instruction than actual storyline. Family photographs become annual ordeals involving 20 minutes of enforced stillness, an eruption of crying, and at least one child with closed eyes for history. Naturally, the greatest concern involves succession. The firstborn son represents the family's future, groomed for inheritance and property, while remaining children must satisfy themselves with marriage, religious service, or the delicate art of avoiding public disgrace. Sibling competition isn't just tolerated, it's practically embedded in the nursery's design. Every achievement, from classical grammar to proper posture, gets recorded and quietly compared. While your children might be observed and occasionally heard, they inhabit a distinct parallel realm, a world of starch, protocol, and the ever-present threat of boarding school. Your legacy rests on them, your standing gets built around them, but heaven preserve you if you ever must oversee bath time. Victorian child-rearing, a profession best delegated to experts. Simply being wealthy won't suffice. You must be peculiar. Welcome the procession of toy dogs in miniature caps, birds that converse in 3 tongues, and the omnipresent horse named for your most disliked relative. In the Victorian millionaire's universe, a pet isn't merely a companion, it's a status marker, a conversation piece, and often a living, yapping excuse to spend additional money on embellishments. If your bulldog lacks a silk-lined bed, a seasonal wardrobe, and meals superior to most street children, are you even attempting? Your acquaintances might own a dog, but does their dog possess a sterling water dish, custom-sewn boots for muddy outings, or a commemorative painting in the parlour? In this golden menagerie, pets serve as family, fashion, and furnishing combined. Canines rule absolutely, particularly those compact enough to fit in a soup bowl and loud enough for neighbouring counties to hear. They get bathed in scented water, costumed for every event, and presented to guests as though they're visiting ambassadors. Your lapdog's closet contains rain gear, celebration gowns, and a miniature naval uniform for spontaneous maritime adventures. You'll catch yourself apologising when your spaniel's morning neckwear conflicts with the drawing room drapery. More than once you've had to explain to the butler why there's a tiny bowler hat floating in the refreshment bowl. But canines merely begin the collection. Parrots command high regard, especially if they can deliver clever remarks in French, recite poetry, or perform a sharp imitation of the parish minister. A parrot limited to repeating standard phrases gets considered embarrassingly bourgeois. Exotic birds, tortoises, rabbits, and occasionally monkeys or lemurs complete your menagerie, each with custom housing and designated caretakers. The more unusual your companion, the more discussions you'll generate, assuming your guests aren't sensitive, squeamish, or requiring smelling salts. Naturally, you can't ignore your horses. Every respectable household demands a stable of well-groomed, slightly temperamental horses, each named for an obscure family member or forgotten British commander. Your riding horse sports custom equipment, dines on fruit and grain, and like you, must appear elegant while jumping obstacles or being led in circles. For visiting guests, the stable becomes its own kingdom, managed by a head groom who knows more family secrets than your butler and will sometimes offer a sympathetic ear when you need to complain about Aunt Penelope's flamingo. Flamingos, incidentally, are essential if you're pursuing maximum eccentricity. No Victorian garden achieves completion without several of these screaming jewel-coloured birds parading about, terrorising the staff and occasionally scaring the mail carrier into premature retirement. Their main function involves looking magnificent during garden parties and reminding everyone that your lawn surpasses most wedding locations in opulence. Pets, however, merely start the hobby parade. Afternoons stretch endlessly, filled with leisure pursuits ranging from refined to unhinged. Lawn bowling, target shooting, and court tennis all represent respectable choices, provided your opponent understands proper feinting technique in defeat. Should weather turn sour, the family might withdraw indoors for card games, embroidery, or the eternal torment of learning woodwinds from Cousin Millicent, who considers herself a musical genius. If you're feeling particularly daring, you might organise a pet exhibition or costume parade, complete with awards for best dressed turtle or loudest weasel. These occasions equally balance chaos and social climbing, as neighbours attempt to surpass each other with increasingly absurd pets and elaborate stories about their backgrounds. You nod along, pretending to believe Lord Pemberton's claim that his macaw once joined afternoon tea with Queen Victoria. Ultimately, the objective involves amusing yourself, amazing your guests, and possibly discovering a pastime that doesn't require embroidering the family coat of arms onto a guinea pig's vest. If nothing else, you'll never experience boredom, surrounded as you are by a symphony of barking, chirping, neighing, and the soft, disapproving rustle of flamingo plumage. Social climbing represents a contact sport played with visiting cards, formal calls, and tea gatherings where everyone pretends to admire each other's millinery. Remember, one incorrect utensil and you're socially banished to the countryside. In Victorian elite society, possessing wealth constitutes only half the challenge. The remainder involves convincing the proper people you're wealthy in precisely the correct manner. Enter the world of calling cards, where your entire reputation can rise or collapse based on your stationery quality, your penmanship's crispness, and whether you remembered to emboss your title in gold, silver, or the ever-audacious crimson. The ceremony starts at the entrance. You never simply arrive. You must be announced by the manservant who will receive your card on a silver platter, examining it like a laboratory specimen. Your card isn't merely paper. It's your passport, your credentials, and your sole protection against social extinction. A card with a bent corner indicates you visited personally. A card with black edging means someone perished, possibly from boredom at your previous luncheon. Once your card gets deposited, you've entered the game. Visits get meticulously planned and ideally briefer than the average hiccup. The morning visit may occur any time between noon and the vague hope of evening. You're escorted into the parlour for a rigidly limited discussion about weather, local gossip, and how brilliant it was for Lady Ashworth to name her new terrier after the Prime Minister. If your host truly appreciates you or your fortune, you'll be invited to remain for tea, an ordeal involving a bewildering array of china, pastries, preserves, and approximately 36 varieties of cake, all of which you must consume while appearing as though you haven't eaten in weeks. Conversation becomes a ballet of flattery, modest boasting, and the ever-present danger of a social blunder. Remember, never praise a competitor's dress too enthusiastically. They'll detect your insincerity. Never mention commerce or currency directly. Tasteless. And never ever inquire how someone's spouse acquired his wealth. When desperate, shift to headwear. Everyone holds opinions about headwear. Then come the tea parties, equally balancing networking events and mental combat. Tea gets poured by the lady of the house, who handles the teapot like a royal sceptre. You accept sugar. 1 cube means you're conventional, 2 means you're presumptuous, and 3 means you'll be discussed until Easter. Saucers exist for observation, never for slurping. The proper fork for pastries is the one farthest from your dish, unless you're in company so fashionable that forks have been prohibited entirely in favour of miniature ornamental grips. Every encounter presents an opportunity or a pitfall. Invitations to balls, banquets, and country retreats get distributed like precious tickets, each one a potential stepping stone or trap. A single error, arriving tardy, selecting the wrong partner for a country dance, or wearing last season's shade, could find you relegated to the social wilderness, forced to spend afternoons visiting elderly relatives and watching your ambitions fade like cheap gilding on a candelabra. To survive, you must gather, organise and remember an ever-expanding collection of calling cards. Each one gets annotated with confidential notes, speaks excessively about pets, hazardous at cards, uncertain about boundaries and table manners. A special silver tray occupies your entrance hall, sagging under the weight of social duty. Pity the household whose tray sits empty. That path leads to social annihilation. Ultimately, social advancement tests endurance, memory, and the capacity to say, "What a simply divine hat!" 50 times hourly without dissolving into giggles or existential crisis. The rewards prove fleeting. An invitation, a compliment, your name appearing in the appropriate newspaper column, but failure's consequences last forever. Miss a call, lose a card, or, heaven forbid, spill jam on a countess, and you might as well pack for the provinces. So you endure, because in Victorian England, the only thing more perilous than losing your wealth is losing your position, and all it requires is one perfectly timed card and an iron stomach for tea. City residences are pleasant, but the genuine status symbol is a drafty, haunted estate in the countryside. Owning 1,000 acres means you never see most of it unless you get lost seeking breakfast. The country estate serves as the Victorian millionaire's badge of distinction, proof you've truly succeeded, or at minimum that you possess sufficient funds to heat 17 mostly vacant rooms and employ a small town's worth of people to debate the optimal method of polishing medieval armour. Your arrival always creates an occasion. The carriage wheels grinding over stone, footmen rushing out like startled waterfowl, and a housekeeper waiting backstage to deliver the quarterly report on bats in the tower. Every surface in the house tells a tale, most involving previous owners, eccentric relatives or unfortunate pets who failed to understand gravity. Portraits of stern ancestors glower from wood-panelled walls, challenging you to redecorate. The library overflows with books untouched since Queen Victoria's crowning, and the drawing room carries faint scents of lavender, worn leather and mysteries. If you remain perfectly motionless, you can detect the ghostly echo of someone having a breakdown over heating expenses. Naturally, it wouldn't be a proper country house without a draught. Regardless of how many tapestries you hang or how vigorously the maids battle the windows, there's always an icy breeze lurking nearby, ready to give you a chill or, if unlucky, a fresh nervous condition. During winter, your breath fogs in the air as you wander endless hallways wrapped in 3 shawls and a sense of historical dread. During summer, the place becomes a hothouse for rare arachnids and various moulds not yet documented by science. Breakfast becomes an epic expedition. You depart from your bedroom hoping for hot tea and a soft-boiled egg. But somewhere between the blue drawing room and the East Passage, you find yourself inexplicably in the trophy room, surrounded by glassy-eyed foxes and a stuffed porcupine in evening wear. You call for assistance, but the only response is the distant sound of a grandfather clock chiming in another time zone. The grounds prove equally overwhelming. Acres of parkland, mysterious structures, a lake inhabited by swans with behavioural problems, and a labyrinth so diabolical you once lost your nephew in it for most of Lent. The garden gets tended by a head gardener who views you suspiciously, convinced you'll request planting something contemporary. He's aided by a battalion of assistant gardeners who spend their days trimming bushes into shapes visible only to the truly hopeful. Country life isn't all flowers and accidental freezing. The social schedule proves relentless. Weekends fill with hunting expeditions, target practice, and the kind of outdoor meals where you sit on a blanket while silently warring with your neighbours over proper cucumber sandwich presentation. Evenings bring dinners that stretch for hours, punctuated by ghost tales, minor scandals, and occasional family séances. Nothing breaks tension like summoning Great Aunt Prudence to complain about the plumbing. When darkness falls, the house transforms into an acoustic marvel. Floorboards groan, windows shake, and the wind wails in a manner that would make even the bravest butler question his career choices. You fumble for a candle and try navigating back to your chamber, only to find yourself in the attic with a sudden, inexplicable desire to revise your will. In the end, owning a country house becomes a full-time pastime. It demands stamina and appreciation for drafts, both the liquid and chilly varieties, and the ability to fake enthusiasm at endless guided tours for visiting city relatives. You might never see all your property, but you'll certainly hear about every broken fence and suspicious anthill for the rest of your days. Congratulations, you've made it. You own the countryside and it owns you right back. Your wealth is old, new, or suspiciously obtained through maritime trade, sugar, railways, or colonial investments. The key thing is you never discuss how it was acquired, ever. The most crucial rule for a Victorian millionaire is that your fortune's source must remain wrapped in respectability's haze, plausible denial, and at least 3 generations of strategic forgetfulness. Old money claims to have simply always existed. New money insists on quoting the family motto in Latin and gesturing toward portraits of scowling ancestors, each painted retroactively to compensate for a glaring absence of actual pedigree. Either way, when someone inquires how your family acquired wealth, you smile vaguely and reference commerce in the same tone most people reserve for infectious diseases. A fortune's origins always remain somewhat cloudy. Perhaps your great-grandfather made his pile during the golden era of shipping, transporting tea, opium, or anything else stackable in crates and insurable against pirates. Or maybe your ancestor invested in sugar plantations, profiting handsomely while never quite explaining why there are so many angry letters from Barbados tucked away in the attic. The more contemporary millionaires prefer railways, waterways, or bold new colonial enterprises, which mostly involved sending large sums to distant territories and hoping something profitable would eventually return, preferably as gold, spices, or a very exotic companion. Whatever the situation, the rules remain identical. Never discuss specifics and certainly never mention the phrases industrial mishap, worker uprising, or government intervention. If pressed, simply allude to wise investments, our ancestors' good judgment, or, if feeling especially daring, divine providence. Ideally, you should seem so disinterested in money that people suspect you have a private mint concealed in the basement. The family fortune isn't just about cash, it's about property, titles, and a variety of heirlooms so grotesque they could only be valuable if someone very important once expired in their presence. There's always a silver tea service, a collection of bone-handled walking canes, and at least one portrait of a distant relative who may or may not have been a privateer. If you're especially unfortunate, your inheritance includes a string of crumbling tenements, a fabric mill in a city you can't pronounce, and a vague but persistent guilt. Money gets managed with a military campaign's seriousness. The family head, usually a patriarch with sideburns wide enough to serve as bookends, meets with the attorney in the study monthly to discuss investments, debts, and which family branch is most likely to disgrace the name this season. The family ledgers stay locked away, and if anyone asks to see them, you respond with horror, followed by a swift topic change to the weather, or perhaps the finer points of salmon fishing. But even the best managed fortunes are never truly secure. Secrets hide behind every door. A great-uncle who lost everything in a doomed Brazilian copper venture, a niece who ran off with the stable boy, or the heartbreaking story of the family emeralds that vanished during one particularly wild New Year's Eve. Any danger to the family fortune gets handled with swift discretion and, when needed, a hasty journey for the guilty party to a secluded cottage in the countryside. Through it all, the real truth about family wealth is that it seldom brings happiness. It carries obligations, endless appointments with attorneys, uncomfortable discussions with broke relatives, and the nagging sense that somewhere deep in the mansion's basement there's a document no one dares examine. Still, it beats being broke, so you drift through existence wrapped in handed-down silk and burdened with untold tales, perpetually prepared to celebrate the family riches and perpetually praying nobody asks what's really stored in the cellar. A grand party is your chance to dazzle and possibly traumatize your visitors forever. there's a full orchestra, 400 flickering candles, a feast that could satisfy a modest nation, and a strong likelihood someone will collapse from sheer excitement or tight corseting. Planning starts months ahead, with the invitation list argued over as intensely as any political proposal. Every family enemy, available gentleman, and minor noble must be invited, plus a scattering of strangers you hardly recognise, just in case they suddenly inherit a title or discover they control something valuable. Like the neighbourhood whiskey distillery, the invitations get penned by hand on ivory paper, stamped with wax, and personally delivered by a footman who's still resentful about trudging 3 miles to the eastern gate. The morning of the celebration arrives wrapped in complete chaos. Staff members rush everywhere, shining, cleaning, positioning flowers, and trying to persuade the household spirits to take the evening off. The head housekeeper stomps around like a general in skirts, barking commands about chair placement and the proper tilt for the marble sculpture of Queen Victoria. Someone uncovers an 11th-hour disaster, typically concerning the state of the guest powder room or the discovery that the family terrier has devoured most of the floral arrangement. When evening comes, coaches queue along the driveway, releasing a constant flow of visitors draped in silk and satin and social climbing. The musicians warm up, starting with a waltz so energetic it could resurrect the departed, and sometimes does, if Great Aunt Millicent is telling the truth. The ballroom sparkles with candles, far too many for anyone with reasonable concerns about fires or poorly secured wigs. Dance cards get passed around, and suddenly the real social scheming starts. Young ladies twitter, mothers conspire, and eligible men eye the refreshment station nervously. The opening dance is a serious, mildly frightening ritual. Everyone knows that one misstep can mean years of whispered mockery. But by the third reel, restraints have relaxed, and at least 2 elderly gentlemen are attempting to dance with enthusiasm that alarms both the musicians and the family doctor. Meanwhile, the banquet table sags under elaborate delicacies, miniature sandwiches that dissolve if ignored, puzzling-shaped gelatin, and sufficient vanilla pudding to please even the most dedicated dessert lover. There are sherbets, creams, pastries, and meat pies. The cheese selection alone needs its own guidebook, and the drink bowl is watched by an alert servant, whose duty is keeping it strong but not actually dangerous. Drama is unavoidable. There will be at least 1 clothing mishap, 3 mysterious vanishings into the gardens, and a theatrical moment involving a lost dancing shoe, or, more probably, a collapsed hairstyle. The neighbourhood busybody, Mrs. Thornton, will gather gossip like a crow, saving it for next Tuesday's afternoon tea. Romances bloom, partnerships shatter, and by the stroke of midnight someone always gets discovered embracing behind a potted plant, hopefully not a family member. As the hours pass, so do the partygoers. Slippers get abandoned under seats, corsets strain against the pressure, and at least 1 elderly lady will gracefully swoon onto a nearby sofa to be revived with aromatic salts and a fresh tumbler of brandy. The orchestra pushes through until the final waltz, performing with the frantic energy of musicians who understand their dinner relies on keeping the dance floor occupied. Cleaning up is its own epic undertaking. As morning light filters in, weary servants try to collect forgotten accessories, brush up decorations, and guide sleepy guests to their carriages. Someone will surely find a youngster napping beneath the food table and a hound happily chewing what used to be the prime rib. The only evidence remaining of the magnificence is the lingering fragrance of roses, spilled wine, and the knowledge that someone standing has been established or magnificently destroyed. Congratulations. You've thrown a Victorian gala. Your guests are amazed. Your ankles are aching, and your canapé recipe is the county's main topic, if only because nobody's completely certain what went into them. Getting anywhere demands a schedule, a manservant, 5 steamer trunks, and nerves of steel. You journey in comfort, but your composure is shredded by the time you arrive. And don't inquire about the facilities on Victorian railways unless you enjoy sleepless nights. Transportation for the Victorian wealthy person is a test of endurance, determination, and the skill to keep your dignity while buried under an avalanche of baggage. The simple mention of a weekend in Brighton or a season in London sets off a household-wide effort comparable to organising a small war. Your gentleman's gentleman studies timetables the size of wall coverings. The lady's attendant delivers instructions about hat containers, and a crew of carriers gets called to transport an astounding collection of cases, umbrellas, and cryptic bundles labelled "Crucial, handle with care." The expedition starts well before departing the residence. First comes the strategy, charting your path to dodge highway robbers, muddy tracks, and most frightening of all, far-flung relatives with firm views about place settings. Your private driver supervises the polishing of the family coach, which gets loaded with sufficient wraps and foot heaters to survive a minor Arctic blast. Within, you're wrapped in travelling rugs, surrounded by provisions, medicinal herbs, and a portable service set elaborate enough for a small army. The actual coach journey is an adventure, mainly in spine-jarring misery. Even the finest suspension can't defeat the ruts. And every hour gets marked by the sounds of the team, the groaning of leather and the constant banging of luggage moving in ways luggage was never designed to move. You try polite discussion as the scenery rushes by, past hamlets, stone walls, and occasionally livestock with a deep personal grudge against vehicles. Naturally, progress advances, and the railroad provides a quicker option. The depot is mayhem of vapour, porters, and aristocrats debating which section their lapdog should travel in. Passes get purchased, cases tagged, and you're shepherded to your compartment, where luxury means plush seats and, if you're unfortunate, a fellow passenger's elbow jabbing your side. For the following 3 hours, rail travel becomes a marathon sport. Your choices include chatting with strangers who might or might not be lesser royalty, gazing sadly through the glass at infinite turnip patches, and defending yourself from a snack cart selling items best called experimental. If you're truly unlucky, you'll need to attempt the train restroom, an accomplishment requiring balance, divine intervention, and a strong survival instinct. The less mentioned about the plumbing, the wiser. Let's just say there's a reason Victorians valued self-discipline. Luggage, meanwhile, develops its own personality. Even the briefest journey needs a team of workers to pack, unpack, and sometimes pursue escaped cases with wheels as obstinate as any family treasure. Heaven preserve you if your baggage goes astray. There's nothing quite as humiliating as explaining to your hostess that your formal wear is presently heading toward Manchester, accompanied by a set of boots and the family ivory comb. Upon reaching your destination, you stumble from the train or carriage, stunned by the noise, smoke, and mental strain of travel. Your host welcomes you with the eagerness of someone about to request your thoughts on wallpaper. A servant takes your overcoat, a maid gathers your belongings, and you're left to smile weakly and wonder how quickly it's acceptable to retreat to your quarters and curse Victorian transit. Despite the ordeal, travel remains vital for preserving your social position and mental health. After all, how else will you remind your acquaintances that you've visited Brighton, witnessed the new railroad, or survived the notorious Sandwich Crisis of 1879? With luck, the return trip will be only slightly less nightmarish, assuming the weather cooperates, the horses behave, and nobody confuses your luggage with a competitor's collection of vintage doorknobs. Travel in the Victorian era, all the elegance of high society, with all the delicate constitution of a cookie in a hurricane. Feeling unwell? Victorian medicine provides a wonderful selection of treatments: mercury, bloodsuckers, or a vigorous stroll through the pollution. Your physician is just as likely to heal you or compose a sonnet about your condition. Let's start with the house visit. If you awaken feeling less than your usual robust spectacle-cleaning self, the first move is calling the family doctor. He appears, top hat crooked and medical bags stuffed with remedies, powders, and the vague confidence only someone charging by the visit can possess. The examination is its own ritual. He questions your temperament, pokes you with a thermometer made of tin, and asks seriously whether you've been feeling sad, sluggish, or simply full of anger. If you confess to any ailment whatsoever, the treatment options unfold like a catalogue of poor choices. The most favoured cure, naturally, is laudanum, a delightful mixture of opium and spirits prescribed for everything from migraines to romantic disappointment. If you're fortunate, it will help you forget why you summoned the doctor originally. If you're not, you'll soon be perceiving more colours than the average landscape painting. Babies, incidentally, also receive laudanum because nothing calms a fussy infant like Victorian medical wisdom. Should you need a stronger remedy, the doctor might turn to mercury, a wonderful poisonous element applied generously to everything from inflamed throats to facial blemishes. If you begin sweating, hallucinating, or shedding hair, it's effective. Pair with a mustard compress or two for maximum impact. A household treatment consisting of spicy paste spread directly on your chest until you're redder than the family banner. No suffering, no improvement has never been interpreted so literally. And then come the leeches. Victorians adore leeches. You have a temperature? Leeches. Sore muscles? Leeches. Spiritual malaise? Attach some leeches to your forehead and pray for relief. At some point, you start wondering if the neighbourhood pharmacist owns stock in the leech business. If you're squeamish, too bad, because the leeches are coming for you, your family, and even the household cat, if he favours one paw for longer than 60 minutes. If your problem is more serious, a fractured limb perhaps, or the mysterious but fashionable complaint called the nerves, the doctor will order bed rest, fresh air, and a diet of meat broth. Meat broth is, regrettably, not broth at all, but a weak, salty liquid whose sole advantage is convincing you that real meals might be unwise. Meanwhile, you're encouraged to sit in a breezy chamber, gaze out at the drizzle, and contemplate the mistake of ever becoming ill. Surgery is an absolute final option, mainly because pain relief is in its early stages and cleanliness is viewed as somewhat trendy. Should you need an operation, you're given a wooden stick to clamp between your teeth and a small glass of whiskey, along with advice to think pleasant thoughts, preferably about your last testament. Surgeons take pride in swiftness, and the less discussed about hygiene, the better. If you live, you're a neighbourhood marvel. If not, at least you've given your family something to discuss until next autumn. For the health-obsessed, the Victorian period is a feast of charlatanism. You can select from homeopathic sugar tablets, electric bands that claim to energize the internal organs, or the eternally popular recommendation to relocate to the coast and consume a quart of seawater every dawn. Alternatively, you might be wrapped in ice, prescribed poison, or instructed to bathe in pine oil for your skin. Sometimes you suspect the actual diagnosis is excessive wealth and insufficient diversions. Despite everything, there's a silver lining. Should you survive Victorian healthcare, you're apt to enjoy a kind of hardy, well-earned wellness, or at minimum, a legendary tolerance for disappointment. And the next time someone suggests a brisk walk through the smog, you can nod wisely and ask, with or without leeches. Donating to the needy is crucial, particularly if everyone witnesses you doing it. Charity balls, food kitchens, and carefully orchestrated photo sessions abound. You're less a humanitarian, more a competitive contributor. For the Victorian wealthy person, charity isn't merely a moral duty, it's a foundation of public image management. Your generous nature is as carefully polished as your silver dining set. Philanthropy is a competition with its own handbook, standings, and endless chances for strategic recognition. It's less about elevating the unfortunate, and more about being observed elevating the unfortunate while wearing the appropriate headpiece and being softly illuminated by gaslighting. The social schedule is crammed with fundraisers, each one a marathon of mingling, small talk, and bidding competitions over who can pledge the most showy amount to the Foundlings Heating Fund. You get invitations on thick embossed stationery. Lady Pemberton requests your presence at the annual broth for the worthy gala. Attendance isn't voluntary. Everyone important will be there, studying you over delicate china and mentally tallying how much you contributed last season. Your personal charitable activities start at home with carefully arranged visits to local poorhouses and infirmaries. You arrive by carriage, hand out coins to amazed youngsters, and distribute bread with the gravity of a minister. There's always a journalist nearby, prepared to record your cleverest comment and preserve it in tomorrow's society columns. Mrs. Weatherby expressed her wish that everyone would attempt to be both appreciative and hygienic. Pictures? Well, illustrations get commissioned, depicting you gazing kindly at the crowds while never actually touching them. The yearly charity gala is your moment to excel. The ballroom gets decorated with streamers, bouquets, and a banner-sized display of your family emblem, just in case anyone forgot whose name appears on the memorial tablet. The orchestra performs while guests mingle, juggling tiny appetizers and enormous opinions about the proper method of serving port. There are presentations, auctions, and shows by local orphans who've been drilled to perfection to sing God Save the Queen and not rob the attendees. Eventually you must make a grand commitment, sufficient to wow the room, but not so much that you establish an impossible standard for next season. Soup kitchens and holiday campaigns provide additional chances for public virtue. You sponsor coal deliveries in winter and food baskets at Christmas, with each donation carefully documented and featured in the organisation's yearly report. Volunteers get sent to deliver presents while you supervise the process, nodding solemnly as you receive thanks, get photographed, and get whisked back to your carriage before you catch a glimpse of genuine suffering. Of course, not all charitable giving is public. Some is a bit more, shall we say, calculated. You might endow a new hospital section, naming privileges included, or finance a school for underprivileged girls, especially if your own daughters are about to enter society and could benefit from the reputation boost. Whispers circulate about who truly profits from your generosity, but as long as the right people are impressed, you can rest easily knowing your legacy is protected. The rivalry among philanthropists is intense. Lady Featherstone might have established a library, but you're establishing two, plus a monument and a yearly writing competition. Sir Reginald is funding scholarships left and right. You counter with a new children's playground, complete with bronze water features and a strategically positioned marble marker. At day's end, charity in Victorian England is as much about appearance as results. You assist, but always with attention to the guest roster, the newspaper feature, and the family slogan engraved above the entrance. Do well, but never without a witness. And if you manage to outshine your competitors along the way, all the better. After all, what's the value of generosity if nobody claps when you demonstrate it? The danger of disgrace is always lurking. One misplaced note or unauthorized dance and you could be shunned by society, condemned to spend your remaining years on the Isle of Wight with only your regrets and an irritable spaniel. For the Victorian millionaire, reputation is paramount. It's more precious than your wealth, more fragile than your finest porcelain, and more apt to be destroyed by a single poorly timed cough at the wrong dinner gathering. The social world is a battlefield, and navigating it demands daily doses of meticulous planning, subtle surveillance, and the kind of suspicion typically reserved for international conspiracy. It begins with correspondence. Every word you pen is a potential explosive device. The incorrect phrase, the wrong greeting, or simply forgetting to use the proper shade of sealing wax can ignite rumours that sweep through parlours like plague. No confidence is truly secure. Servants read everything, neighbours theorise, and the parish priest somehow knows more about your private affairs than your own family. Writing a letter becomes a procedure involving multiple drafts, locked drawers, and the desperate hope that your relative doesn't have wandering hands or a publishing deal. Then there's the issue of social functions. A single error at a ball, say, waltzing with someone you're not legally bound to, can result in instant exile. The dance programs are as dangerous as battle strategies. Accepting the wrong invitation, sitting beside the wrong countess, or chuckling just slightly too enthusiastically at the wrong jest can have social consequences that endure for generations. And heaven help you if your name gets printed in the society pages alongside someone else's controversy. Your household employees, those invisible ghostly figures, are the secret guardians, and sometimes the secret betrayers. The butler knows more than any investigator. The housekeeper can recognise footprints in the rear garden, and the kitchen girl can describe every time you accidentally passed gas at supper, should she be properly motivated by an extra coin from a competing household. Maintaining your staff's loyalty is as vital as maintaining your investment portfolio. Either could destroy your existence in the time it takes to spread butter on toast. Family members present another hazard. Brothers with gambling problems, cousins with mysterious foreign ailments, aunts who consume sherry before midday and then confess their deepest secrets to the merchant. Each poses a threat to your carefully built image. Family gatherings are less about shared memories and more about crisis management. The unofficial creed of the Victorian upper class could easily be, "Let's not discuss that regrettable incident with the livestock, shall we?" Scandal arrives in numerous varieties. The mildest involve a hemline that's slightly too brief or a gentleman spotted without proper gloves. More severe violations include debts, duels, suspiciously rapid engagements or unauthorised business ventures, like that occasion when Uncle Bertram attempted to monopolise the market on imported parrots. The most dangerous are the whispered accusations, affairs, secret children, fortunes gambled away at card tables, each capable of destroying a family faster than a financial collapse. To prevent disaster, you must perfect the skills of denial, diversion, and selective forgetfulness. If discovered in a compromising situation, claim ignorance. "I assumed she was my third cousin once removed." Or redirect using the time-tested strategy of blaming the French. If gossip continues, withdraw to the countryside and wait it out, preferably with a good novel and a solid alibi. Under no conditions should you ever admit guilt, unless you can do so in a best-selling autobiography decades later. Even if you handle everything correctly, scandals have a way of discovering you. Sometimes it's an envious rival, a bored reporter, or simply rotten luck. But the real skill is survival. Keep your composure, bury your secrets deeply, and always maintain an escape route to the Isle of Wight. Spaniel not required. If everything fails, remember that time mends all injuries, except possibly that business with the livestock. Nobody ever forgets the livestock. In Victorian society, the only thing more frightening than poverty is public humiliation. Guard your reputation at any cost, and if you can't, at least ensure the scandal is fascinating enough to be worth remembering. Marriage is less about romance and more about agreements, partnerships, and real estate. Your partner may be delightful, intimidating, or frequently travelling. Just don't expect to wed for love unless you enjoy being impoverished. For the Victorian millionaire, matrimony is primarily a business transaction conducted with the subtlety of a commodity exchange and the emotional warmth of a bank mortgage. From the moment you enter society, or more accurately, your mother enters you into society, your romantic destiny becomes a matter of family strategy, social manoeuvring, and occasional pure terror. The matchmaking starts early, coordinated by a network of mothers, aunts, and helpful acquaintances with sharp eyes for both family crests and inheritance potential. Suitors get assessed like precious artwork. Potential partners are examined for family ties, land holdings, and the crucial question of whether they can provide an acceptable dowry or at least an estate with fewer than 3 obvious leaks. If you're the heir, the pressure is enormous. Everyone expects you to secure the family's future, preferably by marrying into nobility, wealth, or, if fortune fails, a distant cousin whose main asset is a fascinating collection of ceramic figurines. Courtship customs are a public display. Every glance across a packed ballroom, every walk through the flower garden, and every mildly awkward conversation over lukewarm punch gets closely watched by an army of chaperones. If you so much as accidentally touch hands with the wrong person, half the region will be gossiping about it by morning. Letters need approval, dances require scheduling, and reputations must be protected at any cost. For every successful match, there's a mountain of broken engagements, misaligned expectations, and at least one fainting spell courtesy of a particularly ruthless prospective mother-in-law. When negotiations finally produce results, the marriage agreement gets drafted with the precision of a peace treaty. Assets get transferred, payments calculated, and the family lawyer beams with satisfaction as he adds another entry to his invoice. The wedding ceremony is both an endurance challenge and a social show, witnessed by every far-flung relative, family, friend, and opportunist eager to see who weeps first. The bride, the groom, or the parish minister. Presents accumulate in the parlour, most of them either useless, hideous, or both. There will be toasts, uncomfortable speeches, and a ceremonial cake so heavy it threatens the structural stability of the reception venue. As for married life, well, it varies. Some unions develop into genuine fondness, if both parties are lucky, patient, or simply too well-mannered to object. Others settle into polite cooperation, sustained by separate bedrooms and a shared appreciation for travelling solo. If your spouse is charming, you consider yourself fortunate. If intimidating, you stay in their good graces. If frequently absent, well, you can always occupy the emptiness with pastimes, charitable work, or a collection of mildly eccentric animals. Children appear either quickly or eventually, and the real bargaining begins. Names get chosen carefully, godparents selected for tactical benefit, and the matter of schooling debated with the same intensity as last year's financial panic. Every child represents a potential alliance, every marriage an opportunity to strengthen the family's hold on fortune, property, or, at minimum, the local sports club. For those truly rebellious spirits who insist on marrying for affection, the results are catastrophic. A sharp decline in social status, disapproving stares at every function, and the permanent loss of Sunday dinner invitations from half the relatives. Romance is a luxury enjoyed only by poets, the hopelessly innocent, and people with nothing remaining to lose. Everyone else accepts that marriage is a lifelong negotiation, one that gets renegotiated over every breakfast, family celebration, and the occasional unexpected inheritance windfall. So you proceed, arm in arm or at a respectful distance, confident in the knowledge that your union is above all an investment. Love might be optional, but a sound financial foundation is eternal. In Victorian England, a successful marriage isn't about passion, it's about surviving the ballrooms, outlasting the rumours, and remembering to smile at the appropriate people during the family photograph. When not handling business matters, you're hunting, shooting, playing lawn games, or pretending to enjoy boating on the Thames, activities performed only under strict supervision and in highly ornamental clothing. As a Victorian millionaire, you're expected to embrace recreation with the same dedication that ordinary people apply to actual labour. The skill of appearing active while accomplishing very little is an achievement in itself, a graceful ballet of manners, spectacle, and whenever possible remaining seated. For every hour spent managing your investments or feigning interest in the latest parliamentary news, you're rewarded with a bewildering variety of outdoor activities, all accompanied by elaborate regulations and specialised costumes. Let's begin with country sports. The hunting expedition is the highlight of the social calendar, even for those who secretly wish the prey would simply surrender and appear on a serving tray. You rise at dawn, strengthened by a hearty breakfast and a stronger sense of social obligation, to put on wool clothing, riding boots, and a hat that's been in the family for at least 3 generations. The gentlemen take to the fields, rifles across their shoulders, and an entourage of hounds, beaters, and anxious undergardeners following behind. Ladies, meanwhile, might trail at a safe distance, showing just enough enthusiasm to seem robust without actually risking any dirt on their footwear. At day's end, the catch gets tallied, the tales get exaggerated, and everyone retreats indoors for a restorative glass of sherry and a gentle critique of Lord Pemberton's marksmanship. On calmer days, you might participate in a refined game of croquet on the grass, a sport with far more regulations and far more disputes than anyone outside of Victorian England would ever consider possible. Croquet is the ultimate test of social grace and subtle hostility. The ability to send a competitor's ball flying into the bushes with a single innocent tap is celebrated in polite society as the pinnacle of cleverness and skill. Croquet gatherings are also an excellent opportunity for displaying one's summer wardrobe, which features enough lace, ribbons, and impractical hats to keep the local hatmaker prosperous for years. If the weather is uncooperative, which, let's face it, it often is, attention shifts to indoor activities. Pool, card games, and chess provide hours of stationary competition, while more ambitious individuals may attempt the occasional round of sword fighting or archery under the watchful supervision of an instructor who gets paid to both compliment and discreetly intervene should anyone appear likely to strain something. For ladies, needlework, watercolour painting, and supervised piano performances offer a semblance of activity without any risk of inappropriate perspiration. Gliding along the Thames is deemed both exhilarating and utterly stylish, assuming you avoid the actual rowing part. The refined method involves lounging elegantly in the back while someone with sturdy arms and diminished social expectations handles the labour. You gesture approvingly, acknowledge passing friends, and pray your cap doesn't tumble into the water, much like what befell Lady Featherstone during the previous season. Following your aquatic adventure, you arrive home glowing with the healthy radiance of physical activity, which gets swiftly remedied by an afternoon rest and multiple portions of fruit cake. No discussion of Victorian recreation could overlook the health resort phenomenon. Every few months, the complete household relocates to Bath or similar fashionable destinations for the healing waters. This includes soaking in lukewarm, mildly sulphurous baths, attending serious presentations about Mineral Springs' therapeutic benefits, and most crucially, being observed by the appropriate people in the correct pavilion during the proper hours. While genuine relaxation remains elusive, the illusion of wellness means everything. Simply put, recreation in Victorian England represents an intricate, carefully orchestrated demonstration of prosperity, social position, and ornamental clothing. You'll emerge from every pursuit with your standing preserved, your attire spotless, and your actual physical contribution maintained at the lowest possible level. With luck, the only strain you'll experience comes from chuckling at another person's failed attempt to leap over a hedge. Well done. You've conquered the skill of Victorian leisure, proving that with sufficient funds even strenuous labour can be delegated. Standing matters above all else. You arrange portrait sessions, conduct interviews, and occasionally pay the neighbourhood paper to overlook your regrettable tendency of dozing during parliamentary sessions as a Victorian tycoon. Image management isn't a contemporary innovation, but an age-old practice executed with paints, stone, and strategic complements. Your reputation requires careful curation, cultivation, and when needed, salvation from catastrophe through swift action and substantial monetary investment. No instant goes unnoticed, no element too insignificant. If anyone might observe, hear, or worse yet, document it, you must ensure it's nothing less than magnificent. Paintings form the foundation of your reputation campaign. No parlour feels complete without a stern forefather scowling from above the mantelpiece or a recent oil portrait of yourself appearing appropriately courageous, thoughtful, or slightly more attractive than reality. Portrait sessions present their own challenges. Endless hours maintaining a dignified pose while the family artist grumbles about capturing your essence. The objective involves appearing affluent without seeming arrogant, serious without appearing unstable, and mysterious enough to spark interest. Extra credit if you incorporate a meaningful item like a world globe, literature, or the family hound gazing wistfully toward infinity. For the particularly ambitious, you'll commission a complete family portrait, a logistical nightmare featuring 20 relatives, 2 uncooperative toddlers, and a pet refusing to remain still. These occasions demand coordinated outfits, frozen smiles, and the kind of suppressed friction that keeps Victorian portrait artists employed for decades. The final product always feels slightly unsettling, but as long as everyone appears respectable, complaints stay minimal. Static images represent merely the beginning. Photography's emergence and illustrated publications mean your public identity can now reach far beyond your marble corridors. Every appearance at galas, charity functions, or railway dedications presents both opportunity and danger. You must dress appropriately, rehearse your contemplative philanthropist expression, and strategically position yourself beside individuals whose reputation you'd like to share. If photographers capture you favourably, you've won the moment. Otherwise, it's time for diplomatic correspondence with editors and perhaps a subtle contribution to the photographer's preferred cause. Gossip naturally presents constant danger. That minor mishap at the previous year's holiday gathering, the awkward incident at the yacht race, requires swift and decisive handling. You maintain a small team of assistants and public relations specialists whose responsibility involves reframing every situation as either an entertaining story or a touching demonstration of your modesty. When that approach fails, a hastily organised family vacation to Switzerland typically resolves matters. Nothing suggests innocent involvement quite like sudden enthusiasm for mountain singing. Then there's storytelling power. Every distinguished family requires a legend or two, a heroic ancestor who battled at Waterloo, a distant relative who once counselled royalty, or when great Aunt Mildred single-handedly rescued the minister from a charging goose. These tales get repeated at every dinner gathering, becoming more heroic with each telling, until you suspect even the dog questions their validity. Still, the finest legends begin with some truth and conclude with gentle reminders that your family remains, above all else, perpetually fascinating. Image management transcends mere vanity. It represents social survival. In a society where rumours travel faster than telegraph messages and reputations rise and fall within a single season, a carefully crafted persona serves as your finest protection. You understand when to appear dignified, when to be photographed distributing meals, and when to quietly vanish before scandals unfold. Therefore you continue, commissioning paintings, crafting legends, and perfecting the delicate skill of being precisely as remarkable as everyone imagines. If anyone questions your peculiarities, simply smile, recite your family creed of virtue, courage, and ambiguous denial, and remind them that history gets written by the well-depicted. Gas fixtures, cord pulls, basic telephones. Your residence overflows with labour-reducing inventions requiring 3 servants each to function, and you're prohibited from operating any of them. Welcome to Victorian technology's cutting edge, where every modern convenience equally amazes and threatens. As a prosperous homeowner, you're expected to outfit your dwelling with the newest gadgets, not because you'll actually operate them, but because neighbours will talk if you don't. The outcome becomes a residence resembling an experimental engineering showroom, managed by people who fear change more than sudden financial ruin. Let's begin with gas fixtures, those brilliant symbols of advancement and nervousness. Rather than candles, you now possess gleaming glass spheres mounted throughout, powered by invisible tubes snaking through the house like ambitious serpents. Illuminating them requires 2 people. One servant to operate the valve, another to handle a dangerously extended match, and everyone else standing ready with wet fabric for emergencies. The potential for sudden room-filling explosions adds to the atmosphere. When functioning properly, the illumination feels magical. When malfunctioning, You hope your testament remains current. Next, observe the cord pull, an elaborate network of ropes and cables allowing you to request assistance from any room at any time, whether requiring water, an additional cushion, or simply demonstrating your command of meaningless luxury. Each pull bears careful labelling and connects to an enormous panel in the servants' area where a small indicator drops with a delicate sound. To you, it's miraculous. To your staff, it's constant hide-and-seek, complete with daily risks of responding to incorrect signals and being dispatched on futile missions to the storage closet. The household telephone, if you're forward-thinking enough to possess one, serves as both status symbol and source of existential terror. Only the bravest family members dare speak into it, while others view it as something that might suddenly connect them to evil forces or worse, the relatives. Calls require announcement by a servant with the gravity of a royal meeting, and every conversation blends static, shouting, and the persistent sense that privacy has vanished. Heaven help you if it rings during meals, as the resulting chaos may require completely rearranging the seating arrangement. Your kitchen, meanwhile, houses an array of newfangled devices, each more bewildering than the previous. The labour-saving stove promises quicker cooking, provided you maintain a trained technician and fire suppression equipment nearby. The icebox gets filled by a man arriving twice weekly with blocks of frozen mystery, muttering ominously about refrigeration's future. Even the mechanical bread cutter demands mechanical sympathy that eludes everyone except the kitchen maid, who secretly prefers a simple knife. Additional gadgets scatter throughout your mansion. Communication tubes enabling you to shout commands through walls, complex water closets flushing with more noise than train stations, and the notorious dumbwaiter, a miniature elevator for food and rumours alike. These devices intend to save time, but mostly create fresh categories of household alarm. At least twice monthly, someone gets trapped in storage, locked in bathrooms, or startled by lunch's sudden ghostly appearance rising through floorboards. Your role throughout this? Primarily marvelling at ingenuity, praising inventors, and never ever attempting personal operation. The last time you touched the cord pull, you accidentally summoned the entire staff to your bedroom at 2 a.m. and spent 3 days apologising to the cook. Victorian technology remains dazzling, dangerous, and absolutely beyond your responsibility. And really, isn't that what millionaire status entails? Being wealthy in Victorian England means daily confrontation with others' visible suffering. You distribute coins, bake symbolic bread, and try not to contemplate it while consuming roasted meat. The impoverished appear everywhere, forming the silent background to your world of personalised linens and imported rugs. They sweep roads, scrub your entrance steps, and stare hungrily at bakery displays while you pass by in carriages debating afternoon tea versus light dinner's relative advantages. You're fully aware that your fortune depends partly on their invisible work and the world's most ambitious mining operations. Yet social protocol demands charitable performance, a delicate, guilt-tinged dance, occurring between morning and midday meals. Charity involves optics as much as genuine assistance. Every respectable Victorian millionaire participates in seasonal distributions of bread, soup, or coal, especially when journalists watch. Charitable contributions must be both generous and visible. Coins handed to beggars while servants witness the act, or grand gestures like sending stale cake baskets to local orphanages with your name spelled in frosting, naturally. The neighbourhood newspaper dutifully records your generosity, omitting that most recipients haven't seen fresh pastries since the last royal celebration. Churches and charities organise annual campaigns requiring your attendance by both conscience and social calendar. You stand beside tables laden with penny loaves and watery soup, bestowing your most compassionate expression on attendees while the minister nods approvingly. Children shuffle forward, receiving hand-me-down shoes, and everyone works hard, not mentioning recent rumours about your new silk drapes costing more than the local school's annual budget. For the truly ambitious, committees await joining: the Ladies' Benevolent Society, the Coal and Blanket Fund, the Home for Wayward Women. Each provides ample opportunity for feeling useful while supplying material for your next dinner party story. Meetings largely involve debating which families deserve assistance most and ensuring any help accompanies stern lectures about thrift, cleanliness and silent appreciation. The goal involves alleviating suffering while reinforcing established social hierarchy. Sometimes giving becomes a grand affair. Christmas brings the legendary charity ball, where tickets cost weekly wages and proceeds get divided among several worthy causes, minus orchestra and champagne expenses. You dance, donate, and try ignoring the thin, polite smiles of those serving appetizers as you waltz beneath sparkling chandeliers. You comfort yourself knowing that if nothing else, your charitable work earns glowing social column coverage. Of course, guilt persistently visits the Victorian millionaire's table. You can't help noticing the stark division between your worlds. Roasted meat's taste at dinner sometimes fades when remembering families huddled in drafty tenements or barefoot children selling matches in rain. Yet you reassure yourself that annual donations and occasional workhouse visits suffice. After all, personal poverty would help nobody, and you do provide employment, even if it involves extensive shoe polishing and remaining very still. Still, moments arise when illusions waver. A ragged child's cough, a labourer's haunted expression, or unexpected questions from your offspring asking why they're hungry. Mama reminds you that all England's symbolic cakes won't bridge the chasm between your worlds. During these instances, you redouble efforts, bake additional loaves, and if necessary, write cheques large enough to restore peace of mind and your place in polite society. So you continue distributing coins, slicing guilt-laden cake, and praying someone will eventually invent ways to feel generous without the inconvenient side effect of excessive thinking. Until then, at least you'll always have fresh pastries and good stories for the next charity gala. With running water still novel and deodorant uninvented, cleanliness becomes performance. You're more likely to be powdered, perfumed and prayed for than properly washed. Victorian millionaires master appearing clean, even if reality proves less sparkling. Bathing remains a minor engineering achievement, and average bathrooms boast more marble than plumbing. A complete bath represents a rare and significant event, usually announced beforehand so the entire staff can prepare, from heating water to fluffing towels and alerting fire services just in case. You don't simply bathe, but stage a minor opera, complete with worried maids chorus and supporting cast of bath oils and scented soaps. More often you settle for sponge baths, involving tepid water basins, sturdy washcloths, and vague hope that ancestors aren't observing. This daily ritual occurs behind folding screens while your valet or lady's maid provides running commentary on your hair, nails, and moral character. If particularly fastidious, you might request a second basin, one for upper regions and one for lower, maintaining Victorian decency standards even amid personal desperation. Soap arrives in bars so perfumed they could clear infirmaries, each bearing your initials, or at least borrowed initials. Lavender, rose or violet scents fill the air, competing valiantly with ever-present aromas of coal smoke, horse waste, and existential anxiety. Shampoo remains a luxury, often replaced by powder sprinkling or enthusiastic use of hairbrushes with bristles so stiff they could substitute for hedgehogs. Deodorant, unfortunately, remains a glimmer in some future scientist's imagination. Meanwhile, you rely on perfume, cologne, or, if truly desperate, small herb sachets tucked discreetly into bodices or waistcoats. Gentlemen favour musk or sandalwood, while ladies dab rose water behind ears and hope for strong breezes. On particularly warm days, everyone simply prays for rain and forgiving social circles. Toothbrushing presents another adventure. Toothpaste exists, but usually arrives as gritty powder made from chalk, charcoal, and optimism. The brush itself represents Victorian engineering marvels, often crafted from bone and bristles seemingly harvested from particularly stubborn pigs. For minty freshness, you'll settle for strong spirits or quick vinegar gargles. Fresh breath remains more wishful thinking than reality. Hair care becomes both science and ordeal. Men plaster hair with pomade, wax, or even bear grease, creating styles withstanding gale force winds and light artillery. Ladies curl, crimp, and braid with military precision, sometimes sleeping with hair wound around fabric to achieve proper bounce. Wigs and hairpieces prove popular for both sexes, offering instant elegance and reliable hiding places for small valuables or, on difficult days, head lice. For special occasions, powder and rouge get applied with cathedral mural restoration enthusiasm. Pallor gets prized, tanned skin suggests manual labour, which simply won't do. So you dust faces until, resembling haunted pastries, quick carmine brushes to cheeks and lamp-black dabs to lashes, and you're ready for close-ups, or at least ready to face family portraitists without sending them fleeing. Despite all efforts, panic lurks constantly. Sudden rainstorms, stray dogs, or unexpected bishop visits can undo hours of careful preening. During such moments, you rely on strategic fans, hastily donned gloves, and time-honoured excuses, like it must be the weather. After all, in Victorian England, appearing clean nearly equals being clean and requires considerably less work. Well done. You've mastered Victorian hygiene's subtle dance. Powdered, perfumed, and perhaps slightly panicked, you're ready to face another day and fresh rounds of compliments on your impeccable, if mostly imaginary, cleanliness. As darkness descends, your mansion awakens with candlelight, mysterious creaking, and a night servant army. Sleep doesn't come easily, especially fearing burglars, ghosts, or accidentally marrying an American. Nighttime in Victorian millionaire homes becomes theatrical productions, complete with stage lighting, via flickering gas lamps, and enough candles to bankrupt small principalities, supporting servant casts, and scripts leaning heavily toward melodrama. Daily bustle slowly fades, replaced by solemn rituals of securing the house, counting silver, and nervously inspecting every shadow for supernatural activity evidence, or worse, the second footman sneaking midnight snacks. Before contemplating bed, you must survive the rounds. This involves the butler and footman moving systematically through the house, securing windows, bolting doors, and testing locks with prison warden inspection intensity. Victorian homes remain famously insecure with thin glass, rattling frames, and doors groaning in protest every time they're fastened. For peace of mind, you've installed enough locks, bars, and chains to make medieval fortresses jealous. Every latch gets checked, double-checked, and checked again for good measure. Burglars, you're told, lurk everywhere. Ghosts, according to housekeepers, prove even worse. Once the house is secure, evening entertainment begins. You retire to drawing rooms where fire shadows dance along wallpaper and relatives gather for ghost stories, cautionary tales, and latest gossip about Lord Wetherby's scandalous elopement with the opera singer. Children listen wide-eyed to phantom carriage tales, banshees on moors, and haunted portraits that watch you walk. After too many stories, someone always claims hearing attic footsteps or distant, sorrowful moaning, usually window housekeepers discovering moth holes in drapes. Eventually, yawns outnumber nervous giggles. The upstairs landing transforms into candlelit figure processions, each balancing candlesticks, Dickens copies, and certainty that the next corner will reveal either ghosts or cousins hunting biscuits. Every corridor becomes an obstacle course with threadbare carpets, mysterious cold drafts, and ever-present dangers of stepping on cats that have decided hallway centres are ideal for existential reflection. Your own bedroom awaits, a fortress of heavy curtains, embroidered pillows, and enough bedding to survive Siberian winters. The air carries lavender scents and faint fear whiffs. Nightclothes get donned, slippers exchanged for heavier, more practical models. In case of nocturnal emergencies, such as unscheduled dowager aunt visits or discovering bats in washstands before slipping between sheets, A final night servant parade passes through. The maid to stoke fires, the under-butler to recheck locks, and if you're lucky, the cook with cold pie trays and judgmental looks. Your final act involves blowing out candles one by one, careful not to inhale too much wax or set nightcaps ablaze, and listening to silence settle, punctuated only by dozens of clocks ticking and occasional distant barking from neighbours' overexcited spaniels. Sleep, of course, proves complicated. You lie awake listening for signs of life, afterlife, or just reassuring treads of night servants making rounds. If you do manage drifting off, dreams fill with locked doors, lost keys, and vague but persistent anxiety that somewhere in the house an American cousin plans surprise visits. But at last, night embraces you, along with all hopes, fears, and exactly 40 locks on every door. Well done. You've survived the Victorian night, phantoms, burglars, and family dramas included. Sweet dreams. And may the only thing disturbing your slumber be the faint but comforting chime of the grandfather clock in the hall. Communication becomes an Olympic event. Instead of texting, you write lengthy letters on monogrammed stationery using quills sharpened more often than your social instincts. Every note dances with etiquette, from elaborate greetings to stealth insults, and the post arrives days later, just in time to start fresh misunderstandings. In Victorian England, letter writing isn't merely information passing. It's a test of intelligence, social grace, and endurance. You rise mornings to find writing desks already prepared by dutiful maids, fresh ink, blotting paper, quill armies, and intimidating stacks of correspondence requiring immediate attention. You sigh, stretch fingers, and mentally prepare for polite warfare marathons. The first step involves selecting proper stationery. Heavy, cream-coloured paper embossed with your initials remains non-negotiable. Anything less signals either bankruptcy or moral weakness. Paper must be crisp, edges sharp, and envelopes lined with tissue so luxurious it could double as ball gowns. Your ink, naturally, gets imported, preferably from Paris, and comes with warning labels about staining carpets, fingers, and reputations. You dip quills, draw deep breaths, and begin. Opening lines become ballets of humility and coded assertion. My dearest Lady Featherstone, if you're feeling generous, esteemed sir, if you're keeping options open, or simply, sir, if you're prepared for open hostilities, your handwriting becomes performance itself. Elegant loops, decisive strokes, and odd flamboyant flourishes designed to show both refinement and ability to survive 3-hour penmanship virtue sermons. But content rules. Every letter must strike delicate balances, warm but not overly familiar, witty but never crude, and if you're lucky, so cryptic that future historians will spend decades arguing whether you were proposing marriage or inviting someone to picnics. The true art lies in subtext. Are you inviting cousins for tea, or subtly reminding her of that unfortunate blancmange incident at last year's ball? Is your warmest regards an olive branch or velvet-gloved slap? Every sentence becomes a trap, every compliment a test, every apology a chance to win or lose territory in ongoing social chess matches. Then there's postage matters. You can't simply hand letters to butlers and hope for the best. No, you must select correct stamps, ensure addresses get written in both legible and impressive hands, and pray postboys aren't in moods. Local post offices become intrigue hubs, with every letter eyed suspiciously, weighed on ornate scales and dispatched with international treaty solemnity. Waiting for replies exercises patience and anxiety. Days pass, air thickens with anticipation and disaster possibilities. Finally, post arrives, envelope stacks bearing travel scars like smudges, creases, and faint stranger perfume smells. You tear them open with trembling fingers, scanning for hidden insults, coded invitations, or on bad days bills. Inevitably, misunderstandings arise. You reply to your aunt's health inquiry with unfortunate consumption jokes, and suddenly half the county believes you're on your deathbed, A misinterpreted "sincerely yours" can end friendships, while overly effusive "ever your devoted" might trigger duels or unwanted marriage proposals. By the time dust settles, you have new correspondence rounds to address, reputations to mend, and 5 more cream-coloured paper sheets to monogram. Despite hazards, there's certain ritual pleasure, careful word choosing, connection senses, and knowledge that your best zingers may take days to land, but will be remembered for years. In the end, letter writing represents the Victorian answer to social media, painstakingly curated, endlessly analysed, and always open to interpretation. Your mansion may look invincible, but it's basically a tinderbox with plumbing. Fires break out if you glance at candles wrong. Rain seeps through drawing room ceilings, and occasionally newfangled boilers erupt, turning bath time into surprise steampunk reenactments. Property insurance. Keep dreaming. Every Victorian millionaire secretly lives in terror of their own homes. Beneath surface glamour, polished banisters, crystal chandeliers, and reassuring silver glints lurks a hazardous world, each more eager than the last to humble your social ambitions and reduce life's work to cautionary tales. It starts inevitably with fire. Fire remains the ever-present, quietly smouldering enemy. There are candles in every room, open hearths in every hall, and gas lamps installed by men who believed safety was merely a suggestion. Servants get drilled in fire protocol, meaning they're prepared to form disorganised bucket brigades at the slightest smoke whiff. You yourself eye every candelabra with suspicion, knowing that wind gusts, overzealous cats, or absent-minded aunts could spark blazes that would make London fire brigades weep. Even with entire household vigilance, disaster strikes, curtains burst into flames. During particularly dramatic charades rounds, guests drop cigars onto rugs, and suddenly everyone's helpfully offering advice, while you frantically search for buckets that don't contain last week's jelly. When it's over, you're left with scorched carpet patches, stories that will follow you to graves, and realizations that your ancestors survived all this only through luck and timely housekeeper dog interventions. Water, for its part, proves less dramatic but equally destructive. Roofs leak, basements flood, and pipes, those modern marvels, groan, rattle, and occasionally erupt. Sudden downpours send rainwater cascading through conservatories, filling prized fern displays with enough mud to pot entire streets' worth of geraniums. Bath time becomes high-risk events with water boiling, pipes bursting, and at least once seasonally, boilers launching steam clouds so thick that half the household takes it as signs to update wills. Plumbing gets handled by mysterious tradesman breeds, who appear only during emergencies and leave behind invoices and vague despair scents. Electrical appliances, if you're foolish enough to have them, become ticking time bombs. Early vacuum cleaners make more noise than progress. Electric bells summon servants who arrive carrying fire extinguishers just in case. And single-crossed wires can plunge entire homes into darkness or sudden alarming illumination. The phrase "it sparked joy" takes on entirely different meanings. And then there are infestations. Mice nibble at wainscoting, moths launch campaigns against your finest drapes, and family cats, technically employed to handle both, prefer napping in linen closets and ignoring problems entirely. Bedbugs, cockroaches, and occasional cellar snakes keep things lively. You deploy traps, powders, and if truly desperate, professional exterminators who swear the secret involves simply burning houses down and starting again, but real adventure lies in responses, households band together, improvising with buckets, mops, and time-honoured art of blaming youngest footmen. Butlers declare it character-building, housekeepers insist. It was much worse last winter, and cooks threaten resignation unless kitchen ceilings get mended by Sunday. In the end, you learn to live with certain chaos amounts. Your mansion may be a monument to taste and prosperity, but it's also a monument to Victorian optimism, built with bravado, inhabited with courage, and held together by spit, polish, and just hints of existential dread. Property insurance, you're lucky if you can insure your sanity. Well done. You've survived another day in a Victorian house. If you're reading this by candlelight, just keep an eye on curtains and remember, when boilers explode, duck and cover. Being wealthy isn't enough. You must know the precise angle for bowing, proper distance for standing from duchesses, and exactly how many asparagus spears you can eat before being declared social pariahs. Lessons begin at birth and never end, which explains why you're terrified of forks and haunted by Miss Prudence's ghost, your childhood governess. Victorian etiquette isn't just a series of suggestions, it's an ironclad code, more complex than any modern tax law and enforced by armies of governesses, tutors and steely-eyed aunts. From your earliest days, your life gets structured around good manner rituals. Before you can speak, you're taught to curtsy, nod and suppress all natural urges to giggle, yawn, or breathe too enthusiastically in public. By age 5, you can recite proper greetings for every possible social encounter. How do you do? Gets reserved for equals, while your grace stays strictly for duchesses, and apparently anyone with abilities to purchase half of Sussex. Woe betide children who mistake marquesses for viscounts. The shame will haunt families through at least 3 generations. At dinner tables, every fork, knife and spoon becomes a potential landmine. Start from outside and work intones Miss Prudence, hovering like crows at your elbow, and for heaven's sake, do not spear your food. The etiquette school curriculum includes classics like the art of sitting still, small talk science, and napkin folding history. Dancing lessons remain mandatory because nothing's more humiliating than tripping over your own feet in front of dukes. You practice quadrilles until toes ache and enthusiasm vanishes. Learning that smiling gets accepted but laughter does not unless the Countess of Wexford laughs first, in which case you may allow brief decorous chuckles. There are deportment lessons involving hours of balancing books on heads while navigating treacherous corridors filled with strategically placed ottomans. Your posture must be both regal and inviting, but never so relaxed that you could be mistaken for someone in trade. Boys get taught to bow just so, no more than 15 degrees, lest you appear subservient, and girls to curtsy deeply, holding skirts in precisely the right way, lest you accidentally flash ankles and trigger minor scandals. Conversation becomes an Olympic event. You're drilled in polite indifference art, showing interest in others' gout and gardening tales, while never revealing single interesting thoughts of your own. Speak when spoken to, says Miss Prudence, and never ever mention politics, money, or real reasons why Aunt Mildred stopped being invited to Christmas. Topics like weather, the Queen's latest portrait, and relative merits of French versus English marmalade always remain safe, unless, of course, someone in the room is secretly French, in which case you must pivot to floriculture with circus acrobat agility. As for table manners, rules prove arcane. Asparagus gets eaten with fingers, but only if served cold, and only at luncheons in months without R's. Soup must be sipped silently from spoon sides, and if you spill anything, the correct response involves fainting and hoping for discreet servant removal. The forbidden behaviour list proves endless. No elbows on tables, no reaching, no licking knives, and absolutely no burping, no matter how triumphant the meal. Graduating from etiquette school doesn't mean freedom, it simply means tests become more subtle and stakes higher. Every social gathering becomes a minefield, every new acquaintance a potential judge. You learn to listen for sharp breath intakes that signal faux pas, to dread matriarch raised eyebrows, and to fear gently whispered, "Did you see what she did with the fish knife?" In the end, etiquette involves less genuine grace and more survival. You cling to training like life preservers, hoping that if nothing else, you'll avoid disgrace, exile, or the most dreaded fate of all, becoming cautionary tales told by Miss Prudence to the next generation of trembling children. Well done. You are officially well-mannered and possibly traumatized for life. And so, as the last gaslights flicker and servants finally go off to polish silver in their dreams, we leave behind the velvet-cushioned, steam-powered, faintly ridiculous world of the Victorian millionaire. Tonight you've survived a day of agonizing fashion decisions, navigated conversations stiffer than your starched collars, and endured the existential dread of accidentally using wrong dessert forks in front of the Duke of Worcestershire. You've dined on questionable aspic, lost track of at least one child in your East Wing, and tried to relax in bathtubs weighing as much as your regrets. You faced house fires, exploding boilers, and the terrifying spectre of etiquette school, where the only things sharper than quills are social consequences. Yet you persisted, stoically sipping your third cup of weak tea, offering polite nods to people whose names you'll never remember, and clinging to dignity through every minor scandal and overcooked mutton disaster. So as you settle into your own, hopefully smaller and less haunted bed tonight, take quiet moments to be grateful for little things like hot showers that don't require servants, pyjamas with reasonable button counts, and blissful absence of any obligation to host balls for 400 slightly judgmental guests. Maybe even whisper thanks to ancestors who survived social radioactive ruins so you could enjoy central heating and Wi-Fi, because history might be absurd, inconvenient, and covered in 3 layers of crepe. But it's also a reminder that people, whether rich or poor, powdered or just plain exhausted, are endlessly inventive, stubbornly hopeful, and always a little bit ridiculous. Good night, and may your dreams be as comfortable as featherbeds in rooms with only one butler. Sleep well.